Princess Calera sat on her throne and watched Prince Valen stumble out of the chamber. His expensive robes were torn and tears streamed down his perfect face. That made 50 princes. 50 failures. 50 men who thought they could pass her test but couldn't even last a full day. The throne room fell silent after the heavy doors closed. Calera's advisors exchanged worried glances, but nobody dared speak first. They all knew what was coming. "Another disappointment, Your Highness," her chief advisor finally said, his voice careful and measured. Calera didn't respond. She was tired of disappointments. Tired of princes who talked big but crumbled when faced with real problems. The test wasn't even that complicated. Go to Vareth Prime, the dying planet her family was about to inherit. Spend 3 days there. See the suffering. Understand the collapse. Come back with ideas to help. Simple, right? Wrong. Every single prince arrived on Vareth Prime like they were going to war. They brought weapons, bodyguards, and enough technology to terraform a moon. They had plans printed on expensive datapads and speeches prepared for the desperate population. But within hours, sometimes even minutes, they all failed in the same way. Prince Harlan lasted 2 hours before demanding to be evacuated. The smell of the polluted cities made him physically sick. Prince Torin made it to evening on day 1 before the locals threw rocks at his shuttle. He tried to give them orders, treated them like servants. Prince Valen, the one who just left crying, actually made it to day 2. But when a sick child grabbed his robe begging for medicine, he panicked and ran. Calera designed this test for a reason. Vareth Prime was a disaster. The previous ruling family had strip-mined the planet for 300 years, sucked out every valuable resource, and left the population to die slowly. The water was toxic. The soil was dead. The air smelled like chemicals. Millions of people lived in crumbling cities with no hope and no future. And soon this planet would belong to Calera's family. To her, specifically, since she was next in line for the throne. She needed someone who could actually help these people. Not someone who would just give speeches from orbit and send down supply drops. She needed a partner who understood that leadership meant getting your hands dirty. Her father, the Emperor, didn't see it that way. Yesterday he'd summoned her to his private chambers and given her an ultimatum. Choose a consort within 1 month, or he'd name her cousin Davrin as heir instead. Davrin, who'd never worked a day in his life. Davrin, who thought poor people were poor because they didn't try hard enough. The thought made Calera's blood boil. "Your Highness, perhaps if we lowered the standards," her advisor began. "No." Calera's voice was sharp. "I won't lower standards. I'll change candidates." The advisors looked confused. They'd already gone through every eligible prince in the known galaxy. Who was left? Calera stood up from her throne, suddenly restless. The room was a mess from Prince Valen's dramatic exit. He'd apparently tried to demonstrate some kind of plasma weapon before fleeing, and now there were scorch marks all over the marble floor. Servants were already moving in to clean up as they always did. That's when she noticed him. A human in a maintenance uniform was kneeling by the worst of the burn marks, some kind of buffer machine humming quietly beside him. He worked with efficient, practiced movements, completely unbothered by the tense atmosphere in the throne room. And he was whistling. Actually whistling some tune she didn't recognize. Calera couldn't remember the last time anyone had been relaxed enough to whistle in her presence. She watched him for a moment. He noticed a loose floor tile near the scorch mark and took out a small tool from his belt to tighten it. He didn't have to do that. He could have just buffed the floor and left. But he fixed the tile anyway because it needed fixing. The human stood up, examined his work, and nodded to himself with satisfaction. Then he moved to the next scorch mark. His uniform had a name tag. "Jake." "You there?" Calera called out. The human looked up, surprised. "Yes, Your Highness? What's your name?" "Jake Davis, ma'am. I'm with the maintenance contractor for the human delegation." Calera walked down from her raised platform. Her advisors tensed, unsure what she was doing. She approached the human janitor and looked him directly in the eyes. "Jake Davis," she said slowly. "How would you like to take a test?" Jake blinked, confused. "A test, Your Highness?" "Yes. The same test 50 princes just failed." She gestured to the scorched floor. "You fix things for a living, correct?" "Well, yes, ma'am. Mostly cleaning and maintenance, but—" "Perfect." Calera made her decision in that instant. Something about this human felt different. Maybe it was the whistling. Maybe it was the way he'd fixed that tile without being asked. Maybe she was just desperate. "You're my next candidate." The throne room erupted in shocked voices. But Calera didn't care. She was done with princes. Jake Davis was having a perfectly normal Tuesday. He'd already cleaned 3 conference rooms, fixed a broken recycling chute, and was halfway through buffing the throne room floor when his entire life changed. "You," the princess said, pointing directly at him. "You're next." Jake looked behind him, assuming she was talking to someone else. But there was nobody there. Just him and his floor buffer. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." "No mistake." Princess Calera walked closer, and Jake suddenly became very aware that he was covered in cleaning solution and probably smelled like industrial soap. "You're going to take my test." Jake's brain struggled to process this. "Your Highness, I'm a janitor. I clean floors. I fix toilets. I'm pretty sure I'm not qualified to." "I've been watching you for weeks," Calera interrupted. Her voice was calm but firm. "You solve problems efficiently. You treat everyone with respect, from ambassadors to other maintenance workers. You notice things others miss." Jake opened his mouth then closed it. He genuinely had no idea what to say. This had to be some kind of prank. Maybe the other guys from Earth put her up to it. They were always joking about how he took his job too seriously. But the princess wasn't smiling. And her advisors definitely weren't laughing. In fact, her advisors looked like they were about to have a collective heart attack. "Your Highness, this is absolutely unacceptable." One of them, a tall alien with purple skin and too many fingers, practically shouted. "A human? A commoner? A janitor?" "Imperial law states I may test any candidate I choose," Calera said coolly. "But surely you don't mean." "I mean exactly what I said." The princess turned back to Jake. "You have 1 hour to prepare. Pack whatever you think you'll need." Jake's supervisor, Carol, appeared from somewhere in the back of the throne room. She'd been replacing air filters and had clearly heard everything. Her face was bright red from trying not to laugh. "Your Highness, if I may," Carol said, barely keeping it together. "Jake's shift doesn't end for another 3 hours. Should I mark this as personal time or—" "Mark it as imperial business," Calera said. "He's officially excused from all other duties." That's when Jake realized this wasn't a joke. This was actually happening. The Princess of the Celestial Imperium, ruler of about 6,000 planets, had just conscripted him for some kind of test that 50 princes had apparently failed. "What exactly is this test?" Jake asked weakly. "You'll find out when you get there," Calera said. "1 hour, Mr. Davis. Don't be late." She swept out of the throne room with her entourage, leaving Jake standing there with his mouth open and his floor buffer still humming beside him. Carol burst out laughing the second the doors closed. "Oh man, Jake. Oh man, this is incredible." "This is insane," Jake corrected. "What just happened?" "You just got volunteered for some kind of royal test, that's what happened." Carol was practically crying with laughter now. "Do you have any idea what you're supposed to do?" "No. She didn't tell me anything." Jake ran his hand through his hair, which was probably a mess. When was the last time he'd even looked in a mirror? "Carol, what do I do?" "Well, you've got an hour to figure it out." Carol checked her watch. 53 minutes now, actually. Better get moving. Jake stumbled back to the human quarters in a daze. The space station was huge, and the human delegation lived in a separate wing with Earth normal gravity and atmosphere. He burst into the shared dormitory where about 20 other Earth contractors lived. "Guys," he said breathlessly, "you're not gonna believe what just happened." His roommate Tyler looked up from his video game. "Let me guess. You found another creative way to unclog a drain." "The princess just volunteered me for some kind of test." The room went silent. Then everyone started talking at once. "Wait, the princess? What kind of test? Dude, are you serious? Is this about the thing with the princes?" Jake grabbed his duffel bag and started throwing things into it. "I have no idea what's happening. She said I have an hour to prepare, but she didn't say what I'm preparing for." Tyler jumped up. Okay. Think logically. What do you need for an unknown situation?" "Everything," Jake said helplessly. "Start with basics," Carol said. She'd followed him from the throne room. "Change of clothes. Toiletries. Your tool kit." "My tool kit." Jake paused. "Why would I need?" "Jake, you're a fixer. That's literally what you do. Take your tools." That actually made sense. Jake grabbed his maintenance bag, the one with his multi-tool portable scanner, duct tape, and about 50 other things he'd accumulated over 2 years of working on the station. Then he threw in some clean uniforms, his toothbrush, and raided the community snack drawer for protein bars and granola. "Take my thermal blanket," Tyler offered. "And here, take this water purifier tap pack. My sister sent them from Earth." Other guys started contributing. "Batteries. first aid kit, a pocket knife. Someone even gave him a lucky rabbit's foot keychain. Guys, I don't even know where I'm going, Jake protested. Doesn't matter, Carol said. You're representing Earth now, buddy. Don't mess it up. Jake made it to the shuttle bay with 2 minutes to spare. The princess was already there, along with a small crew and way too many advisors who still looked upset about the whole situation. Mr. Davis, Clara acknowledged him. Ready? Not even a little bit, Jake said honestly. Then added, Your Highness. For the first time he saw her almost smile. Good. Honest answer. Let's go. As the shuttle lifted off, Jake looked out the window at the space station getting smaller below them. Tyler and Carol were probably watching from observation deck, laughing their heads off. Try not to embarrass Earth too badly, Carol had told him right before he left. Right. No pressure at all. The shuttle broke through Vareth Prime's atmosphere, and Jake got his first look at the planet through the viewport. His stomach dropped. Oh, he said quietly. Oh no. The planet below looked sick. That was the only word for it. The clouds were an ugly yellow-brown color, and the land visible beneath them was gray and dead. No green anywhere. No blue oceans. Just endless stretches of dying cities and barren wasteland. This is what you'll be working with, Princess Clara said from across the shuttle. Still think there's been a mistake? Jake pressed his face closer to the window. What happened here? 3 centuries of strip mining. The previous dynasty extracted every valuable resource and left. Her voice was cold. My family inherited this world 6 months ago. We're trying to fix it, but nobody knows how. The shuttle landed on the outskirts of a massive domed city. Through the dirty transparent panels of the dome, Jake could see thousands of buildings in various states of collapse. The landing pad itself was covered in cracks and rust. When the shuttle doors opened, the smell hit him immediately. It was like burning plastic mixed with sewage and something else he couldn't identify. Jake's eyes watered, but he stepped out anyway. Princess Clara stayed on the shuttle. You have 3 days, she said. A guide will meet you at the entrance to the city. Everything you see, everything you do is being recorded. Good luck, Mr. Davis. The shuttle lifted off before Jake could ask any questions. He stood there alone on the cracked landing pad, clutching his duffel bag, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. A figure approached from the city entrance. It was a Vareth native, humanoid but with grayish-blue skin and large dark eyes. He wore patched clothing and looked exhausted. You're the new test taker? The Vareth asked. His voice was flat, like he'd given up expecting anything good. I guess so, Jake said. I'm Jake. Rennick. The Vareth didn't offer his hand. Follow me. Try not to touch anything toxic. They walked into the city, and Jake's heart sank further with every step. Buildings were falling apart. Families huddled in doorways. The streets were covered in some kind of slick residue that made walking treacherous. And the people, they looked at him with hollow, hopeless eyes. How many people live here? Jake asked. About 2 million in this city alone, Rennick said. There are 40 cities like this across the planet, all dying slowly. They passed a public square where a crowd had gathered around a broken water distribution point. People were arguing, pushing, desperate. Water pump's been broken for 3 days, Rennick explained. Backup systems failed 2 years ago. The princes who came before you promised to fix everything. None of them even made it past the first day. Jake stopped walking. The water pump. That's broken right now. Yes. Why? Jake dropped his duffel bag and walked toward the pump. The crowd parted, watching him suspiciously. The pump was old, probably decades past its intended lifespan. But it was a design Jake recognized, similar to industrial pumps he'd maintained on the space station. Do you have tools? Jake asked Rennick. Some. In the maintenance depot. But it doesn't matter. We don't have replacement parts. Maybe we don't need replacement parts. Jake knelt down and examined the pump housing. Sometimes things just need adjustment, not replacement. Rennick stared at him. You're a prince? No. I'm a janitor. For the first time, something flickered in Rennick's dead eyes. Maybe surprise. Maybe hope. He disappeared and returned 10 minutes later with a basic tool kit. Jake worked while the crowd watched. The pump's main seal was worn, but he couldn't replace it. Instead, he adjusted the pressure valve to compensate, then noticed the intake filter was completely clogged. He cleaned it out, finding decades of mineral buildup. Try it now, he told Rennick. Rennick hit the activation switch. The pump coughed, sputtered, then began humming. Water, brown and questionable but still water, began flowing into the distribution tank. The crowd erupted in shocked voices. Some started crying. Jake stood up, wiping his hands on his already dirty uniform. That'll hold for maybe a week. The seal really needs replacing. Where would I find the parts catalog for this system? Rennick was staring at him like he'd just performed magic. You fixed it? In 20 minutes. You actually fixed it? It's not really fixed, Jake said. It's more like, temporarily unbroken. Do you have any old generators or equipment that's been scrapped? Sometimes you can salvage parts from. Yes. Rennick grabbed his arm. Yes, there's a whole warehouse of dead equipment. The other princes never asked about it. They just wanted to bring in new technology from orbit. Jake spent the rest of day one in that warehouse with Rennick and 3 other Vareth engineers. They showed him their broken infrastructure, their failing systems, their desperate attempts to keep civilization running with nothing. Jake didn't try to fix everything. He couldn't. But he listened. He asked questions. He learned how their systems worked, what they'd already tried, what resources they actually had. When the engineers showed him a complex water purification system that had failed, Jake didn't promise orbital technology. Instead, he showed them a trick he'd learned on Earth for emergency filtration using sand, gravel, and activated charcoal. It's not perfect, he admitted. But it's better than toxic water, and you can build it with local materials. By evening, word had spread. The human wasn't like the princes. He didn't give orders. He didn't make grand promises. He just worked alongside them, sharing knowledge, treating them like equals. A group of children approached Jake while he was taking a break, eating one of his granola bars. They stared at him with huge, hungry eyes. Jake looked at his remaining food. He had enough for 3 days if he was careful. Or he could share. He broke the granola bars into pieces and handed them out. The kids snatched them up like they were precious gems. Up in orbit, Princess Calera watched her monitors in silence. This human janitor was doing something none of her princes had managed. He was treating the Vareth people like they mattered. Jake woke up on day 2 in a small room that Rennick had found for him. It wasn't much, just a cot and a broken chair, but it was dry and the roof didn't leak. He'd slept better than expected, probably because he was exhausted from the previous day's work. When he stepped outside, he found about 30 Vareth people waiting for him. Good morning? Jake said, confused. A woman stepped forward. She had the same grayish-blue skin as Rennick, but her eyes looked less hopeless than most people Jake had seen. You showed Rennick how to salvage parts yesterday. My district has a broken heating system. Can you teach us? Before Jake could answer, another voice called out. Our recycling processor is jammed. The princess said we needed a new one from orbit, but maybe... The school's air filters are clogged, someone else added. Our children are getting sick. Jake held up his hands. Okay. One at a time. I'm just one guy, I can't fix everything. You don't have to fix it, the woman said. Just teach us how. We'll do the work. That's when Jake realized something important. These people didn't want a savior. They wanted knowledge. They wanted to be able to fix their own problems. All right, Jake said, thinking fast. Who here has maintenance or engineering experience? About half the hands went up. Perfect. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to split into teams. Each team takes one problem. I'll rotate between teams and show you what I know, but you do the actual work. And anything you learn, you teach to someone else. Deal? The crowd murmured in surprise. Apparently this wasn't what they'd expected either. By mid-morning, Jake had 5 different teams working across the district. He spent an hour with the heating team, showing them how to bypass a broken control circuit. Then he moved to the recycling processor team, where a young Vareth engineer named Selva had already figured out the problem just by watching Jake work on the water pump yesterday. The jam was here, Selva explained, pointing to the intake. I cleared it and adjusted the pressure. Is that right? Jake examined her work. It was better than right, it was exactly what he would have done. That's perfect. How'd you learn so fast? Selva shrugged. You showed us it's okay to try things. The princess told us we were too primitive to understand their technology. You treat us like we have working brains. Well, you do have working brains, Jake said. Better ones than mine, probably. You've kept this city running with almost no resources for years. That takes serious skill. Word spread fast. By afternoon, people Jake had never met were sharing solutions with each other. The heating team taught their technique to another district. The water filtration trick Jake had shown yesterday was being replicated in 3 other locations. People were trading salvaged parts, sharing tools, actually talking to each other instead of competing for scarce resources. Jake found himself in a converted community center that evening, surrounded by about 40 people. Someone had asked about food and Jake remembered something from his childhood on Earth. My grandmother grew vegetables in our apartment using recycled bottles and scrap materials, he said. It's called container gardening. You don't need soil, well, not much soil. You can grow food almost anywhere if you know the trick. He started sketching designs on a broken tablet someone had found. Simple greenhouses made from salvaged transparent panels. Hydroponic systems built from old pipes. Growing containers made from anything that held water. The key is keeping it simple, Jake explained. If it's too complicated, it breaks and you can't fix it. But if it's simple, you can maintain it forever with local materials. That's when he heard footsteps behind him. The crowd suddenly went very quiet. Jake turned around and found Princess Calera standing there. She was wearing simpler clothes than on the shuttle, but there was no mistaking who she was. Everyone in the room immediately bowed or knelt. Please don't stop on my account, Calera said. I want to see what you're teaching. Jake swallowed nervously but kept working. He showed the group how to seal the growing containers, how to create a water circulation system, where to position them for maximum light exposure. Calera watched in silence for several minutes. Then she asked, Mr. Davis, why aren't you trying to impress me? Jake looked up from his work. Your Highness. The test, Calera said. You're being evaluated. Every prince who came before you spent their entire time trying to impress me with grand plans and advanced technology. You're teaching people to grow vegetables in bottles. Jake set down his tools. Your Highness, I'm a janitor. I clean things and fix things. I figured this test wasn't really about me, it was about them. He gestured to the Varith people around him. These are your future subjects, right? They're the ones who have to live here after everyone leaves. And? Calera prompted. And every system I've ever fixed taught me the same thing. Fancy, complicated solutions always break under pressure. You need simple, robust fixes that people can maintain themselves. Jake picked up one of the bottle greenhouses. This isn't impressive. It's not advanced technology. But 20 years from now, people can still build these. They don't need parts from orbit. They don't need engineers with fancy degrees. Just knowledge and materials they already have. Calera was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the Varith people watched nervously. The princes, Calera finally said, they saw subjects to rule. Resources to manage. Yeah, I noticed, Jake said carefully. But that's not what these people need. They don't need a ruler. They need a partner who respects them enough to help them help themselves. Calera's expression changed. It was subtle, but Jake saw it. Understanding, maybe even relief. Carry on with your lesson, Mr. Davis, she said quietly. I'll be watching. She stayed for the rest of the evening, observing as Jake taught and the Varith people learned. And for the first time in 3 months of testing, Princess Calera understood what she'd been looking for all along. Day 3 arrived faster than Jake expected. He woke up sore, covered in bruises from crawling under broken machinery, and his maintenance coveralls were beyond saving. But something felt different in the city. People were smiling. Actual smiling. Renick found him at breakfast. A thin protein paste that tasted like cardboard but was apparently the local staple. The princess wants to see you, Renick said. At the Central Administration Building. 1 hour. Jake's stomach dropped. Right. The test. He'd almost forgotten he was being evaluated. He'd been so focused on actually helping people that the whole choosing a royal consort thing had slipped his mind. How do I look? Jake asked, glancing down at his filthy uniform. Renick smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen from him. Like someone who works for a living. That's good. The Central Administration Building was the least damaged structure in the city, which wasn't saying much. Princess Calera waited in what used to be a council chamber. Her advisor stood behind her, looking as disapproving as ever. Jake walked in and tried not to track too much dirt on the floor. Old habits. Mr. Davis, Calera said formally. Your 3 days are complete. What solution do you propose for Varith Prime? Here it was. The moment where he was supposed to present some grand plan that would save the planet. Jake reached into his bag and pulled out a battered tablet. Selva had helped him compile everything last night. Your Highness, I don't have a solution, Jake said honestly. But they do. He handed her the tablet. Calera's eyebrows rose as she scrolled through it. These are project proposals, she said slowly. Water reclamation, agricultural development, infrastructure repair. Mr. Davis, did you write these? No, ma'am. The people here did. Renick and his engineering team. Selva and the recycling specialist. Farmers who figured out how to work with the dead soil. I just helped them organize their ideas. One of the advisors scoffed. This is your solution? Asking the locals what they want. Yes, Jake said simply. He turned back to Clara. Your Highness, I can't save this planet. Nobody can save it for them. That's the problem. Everyone keeps trying to save them instead of helping them save themselves. Explain, Clara said. Her voice was neutral, but Jake thought he saw interest in her eyes. Humans have a lot of experience with this, Jake continued. We've polluted our planet, wrecked our ecosystems, nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. We've crawled out of holes we dug ourselves. He met her gaze directly. You know what we learned? Outside saviors don't work. You can't fix people's problems for them. You have to give them tools and knowledge, then get out of their way. Jake pointed to the tablet. Every project on there uses local resources and local knowledge. Nothing requires supply drops from orbit. Nothing needs advanced technology they can't maintain. It's all simple, achievable, and most importantly, they designed it themselves. They know it'll work because they understand their own planet better than any outsider ever could. This is absurd, another advisor interjected. These people need leadership, not. They have leadership, Jake interrupted, which was probably disrespectful, but he was too tired to care. Rennick's been keeping the water systems running for 10 years with spare parts and hope. Selva taught herself engineering from broken equipment manuals. There are farmers here who've kept their families fed with nothing but determination and creativity. His voice grew stronger. These people don't need someone to rule them. They need someone who respects them enough to be a partner, not a dictator. The room fell silent. Clara stared at the tablet, scrolling through page after page of proposals. Real, practical, achievable proposals. You don't need someone with all the answers, Your Highness, Jake said quietly. You need someone who knows how to ask the right questions. And then actually listens to the answers. Clara looked up at him. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she stood. I've made my decision, she announced. Jake Davis, I accept you as my consort. The advisors exploded in protest. Jake's brain short-circuited. Wait, what? He managed to say. You passed the test, Clara said. A small smile played at her lips, the first genuine smile Jake had seen from her. You're the first person who understood what I was actually looking for. But I'm a janitor. You're someone who sees people as equals deserving of respect and empowerment, Clara corrected. That's worth more than any royal bloodline. The journey back to the space station was surreal. The wedding preparations were even more surreal. The Emperor himself summoned Jake to his private chambers, looked him up and down, and asked a single question. Can you actually do this job? Jake thought about Vareth Prime, about Rennick and Selva and all the people he'd worked alongside. Your Majesty, I can try. And when I don't know something, I'll ask for help. That's all anyone can really do. The Emperor studied him, then nodded slowly. Perhaps that's exactly what this empire needs. Jake had one condition before accepting officially. He still got to fix things with his own hands sometimes. Clara agreed immediately. She understood that was part of who he was. The wedding broke about 1,000 years of imperial tradition. Instead of a formal state dinner, Clara insisted on a potluck. Delegations from across the empire brought food. The Vareth people came too, bringing vegetables from the first successful harvest in their new greenhouses, Jake's greenhouse designs, built from salvaged materials. Jake wore a formal version of his maintenance uniform. Clara wore her royal regalia. Somehow it worked. The Emperor watched the celebration looking confused and slightly horrified. Clara had never been happier. And across the galaxy humanity's reputation shifted. Not conquerors. Not warriors. But the species that knew how to make things work when everything was broken. The species that got down on their knees in the dirt and actually helped. Jake Davis, former janitor, was now technically a prince. But he still carried a multi-tool in his pocket. Just in case something needed fixing. Because some things never change even when everything else does.